Let's go ahead and get out your Bibles and turn to 2 Kings 3. 2 Kings 3. Be quick, because I have no time to spare. I want to make sure that I get through this, or get enough through that I did. But I thank you for being here. As Mr. Chuck prayed in his prayer, this is the best place to be. There's nothing better than being here, and I want to thank you for encouraging at least me by attending here and worshiping some more tonight. In 2 Kings 3, we're introduced to one character, and we are reintroduced to the second character. That first character is Jehoram, and that second one is Jehoshaphat. And as we're introducing these characters, we see that they have two parallel personalities. That Jehoram, is Nolan already read for us, did evil in sight of the Lord, and Jehoshaphat is basically the complete opposite of that. And yet you see them both in 2 Kings 3, they come together to solve a common problem, and that problem being that they have Moabites that were rebelling against Israel, and they come together to solve that problem. And when they come together to solve that problem, they react completely differently. So there you can see a comparison, and we can self-evaluate, am I like Jehoram, or am I more like Jehoshaphat? And we'll see this as we go through this together. Often, especially nowadays, maybe, I seem to find myself really self-reflecting. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, I don't want to go too deep into this, but if you remember the Orlando shooting, and what's sad about shootings today, even maybe more so than when shootings happened in the past, is now through modern-day technology, you're learning about these people's last thoughts in their last hours. And I don't encourage you to do it unless you have a strong gut. But you can go on the internet and you can read text messages that are recorded from the victims of these shootings in their last moments. And you can see the things that they're thinking about and that they're worried about. And a lot of times if you stumble across these text messages or these Twitter feeds or whatever it may be, you end up self-reflecting, thinking, would I be thinking the same things that these people are if I was in that situation? If you were in a shooting, what would be your first response? What would be the things that you're thinking about? What would be the things that you're worried about? What would be the things that you have hope about in that situation, that extreme situation? Well, here Jehoram and Jehoshaphat are both in an extreme situation, and we see their thoughts and their feelings about that. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the solution is going to be before we get to it. Number one, Jehoram, his last thoughts or his solutions in that extreme situation was nothing. He had no clue what to do. He had no hope. He didn't expect anything. He was just following his feet. However, Jehoshaphat had already prepared himself to seek the Lord. And that's what's said about him, is that he basically, sort of like Daniel, had already purposed in his heart that when this bad thing happens, I'm going to trust in God. I'm going to follow God. I'm going to do the things that God has told me to do, and I'm going to be okay. And maybe if we're in an extreme situation or just a simple, easy situation, that we can be more like Jehoshaphat and immediately go ahead and prepare ourselves to seek God. So first, let's look at the context of 2 Kings 3. Then we're going to evaluate Jehoram. Then third, we're going to evaluate Jehoshaphat. And then finally, at the end, we're going to actually look at the account and see the way they reacted in an extreme situation together. So first, let's put us into context. Hopefully you can see this. If you can't, it's okay. But this just kind of helped me put together of where we are in the timeline of the nation of Israel. Green here is Judah, and here in red is Israel, because we've divided the kingdom. So at the beginning, you see David up here. Then David has Solomon. And we keep on going down, and then this is where we're at right now, Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat takes his reign the same time that Ahab and Jezebel are in reign of the northern kingdom of Israel. Jehoshaphat is king of the southern kingdom of Judah. So Jehoshaphat ends up getting in trouble, as we'll see, because he tries to make an alliance with Ahab, and Jehu the prophet has to shut it down. But eventually, Ahab dies, and Jehoram takes the throne. Ahab and Jezebel's son, Jehoram. And that's the Jehoram that we're going to look at, the king of the northern tribe, Israel, of the northern state. Now, I don't want us to get confused, because Jehoshaphat, and this will just show you how difficult this is sometimes, guess what Jehoshaphat named his son? Jehoram. So it's a little difficult, but we're not going to talk about him at all. We're talking about this Jehoram. But what's going to eventually happen is Elisha when Elisha's in power, he is going to get Jehoshaphat's other son, Jehu, and he is going to make Jehu the king of Israel here. So that Elisha maybe does this trying to unify the kingdom. He tries to put a king of Israel that's actually related to David in that royal line. So you kind of see where we are here. That we have Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. We have Jehoram, the son of Ahab and Jezebel in Israel. But eventually one of Jehoshaphat's sons is going to kill Jehoram and kill Jezebel, and he's going to take the throne in Israel. However, sadly, both of Jehoshaphat's son and Jehu, his son and the king of Judah, his son king of Israel, both turn out evil themselves. So it doesn't really work out. But here we are, Jehoshaphat and Jehoram. So let's read now 2 Kings 3, just the first 3 verses, what Nolan did in our scripture reading. Verse 1 of chapter 3, Now Jehoram, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel at Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And he reigned 12 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and mother, for he put away the sacred pillar of Baal that his father has made. Nevertheless, he persisted in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and he made Israel sin. He did not depart from them. So just looking at these first 3 verses, and these are the only really 3 verses that we have about a summary of his life. But we see, obviously, it's already been said, this is the son of Ahab and Jezebel. He became king of Israel during Jehoshaphat's reign. So Jehoshaphat has already reigned for 18 years when Jehoram comes into play. So he's probably a lot younger than Jehoshaphat. And we see that he does evil in the sight of the Lord like all the kings of Israel. But here the writer makes this point. He doesn't do evil like Ahab and Jezebel. He does it more like Jeroboam. He does it more like Jeroboam. Well, what would that mean? Well, Ahab and Jezebel, if you remember, a while back I went over Elijah, and we spent the whole time talking about the rivalry between Jezebel and Elijah. But Ahab and Jezebel were all about Baal, the Babylon god Baal. And we see that Ahab builds all these idols for Baal and all this type of thing, all centered around Baal. Well, when Jehoram comes to power, he gets rid of all that. And he even gives him credit for that. He gets rid of the big pillar of Baal that Ahab made for this false god. He gets rid of that, but he still lives in sin more similar to the way Jeroboam, the first king of the divided kingdom of Israel, did. Which basically meaning, even though he got rid of Baal, he lived in idolatry, just like Jeroboam does. We see Jeroboam build the 2 calves up in the northern kingdom of Israel early on, so people don't have to travel to Jerusalem anymore to make sacrifices. And he makes these 2 calves and he says, "These are the gods that delivered you from Egypt." It was a complete lie. It was a complete lie, and he was setting up idolatry, something God would never want to happen. But this is what he does. He continues in idolatry. I think some of the key verses to look at his character is in verse 3. The first word is persisted. Nevertheless, he persisted in the sins of Jeroboam. And there at the end, if you're reading New King James, it says he did not depart from the sin. That he persisted and he did not depart. Meaning that Jehoram never repented. He never truly repented. And of course he gets a little better than the way his parents were, but that doesn't matter. He's not willing to go the distance that God has asked him to go. And he does not depart from the sin, and he persists in the sin. And this is a type of attitude that God cannot work with. He cannot work with someone who wants to persist in their sin. He needs a broken, contrite heart that's willing to change, willing to repent, and that was not Jehoram. However, we do see that in Jehoshaphat. That broken, contrite heart that is willing to make changes in his life. He's willing to repent for the sake of having a relationship with God. So, you can keep your marker there in 2 Kings 3, but we need to turn to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 19. 2 Chronicles 19. Now, as we're flipping, even though we're going forward in our Bibles, we are going back in time. So this is not the chronological view here. We're actually going back into time, back when King Ahab is still alive, back when Elijah is still on the earth, and back when Jehoshaphat has just started his reign. So in chapter 19, Jehoshaphat, very early on, Ahab comes to him and he says, "I would like to go on a campaign with you and basically keep Syria safe, this area." So Jehoshaphat agrees to go with King Ahab to go solidify the state, to protect the common people there. Well, when he gets back, Ahab ends up dying on the battlefield, as we see Elijah said was going to happen. He ends up dying on the battlefield. Jehoshaphat comes back home, and the prophet Jehu comes to him and rebukes Jehoshaphat for making an alliance with King Ahab. Verse 1 of chapter 19. Then Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, returned safely to his house in Jerusalem, and Jehu, the son of Hananiah the seer, went out to meet him and said to Jehoshaphat, "Should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? Therefore the wrath of the Lord is upon you." So we're just going to stop right there for just a second. We see here that Jehu rebukes Jehoshaphat for aiding Ahab in this military campaign. He lets him have it. And even though Jehoshaphat survived the campaign, unlike Ahab, he still lets him have it, saying, look, this is someone who hates God. This one is someone who openly hates God, and yet you're willing to make an alliance with him. You're willing to go out and do this stuff with him. And you kind of can figure here in our own relationships here on this earth, imagine the way God feels about it when we have relationships, very strong friendships with people that are evil. I don't believe that's something that God likes, because God is worried about those that have an influence on us. He wants himself to be the greatest influence on that. However, verse 3, picking up, he says, "Nevertheless, good things are found in you, in that you have removed the wooden images from the land and have prepared your heart to seek God." So he rebukes him, the prophet Jehu does. He tells him, you should never have done this, but you know what? Nevertheless, I can say some good things about you. And one of those good things is that you have prepared your heart to seek God. Why would Jehu be able to confidently say this to Jehoshaphat in this rebuke? I think what it is Jehu understands that even though Jehoshaphat should not have done what he did, he understands that since Jehoshaphat lives in this attitude of preparing himself to seek God, that Jehoshaphat is going to follow God right out of this situation, and Jehoshaphat is going to repent because he's the type of person that has prepared himself to seek God, no matter what the situation is. And Jehu rewards him for saying this. And one more thing to just say this about Jehoshaphat's character, and this might be maybe just me being a little bit skeptical, so take this of how you want it. But what name does Jehoshaphat give to his son that becomes king of Israel? Jehu. He gives his son the same name as the name of the prophet that comes to him and rebukes him. That might be something special there. And the only reason I go into this is because David did the same thing. David had his first son that died. Then he named his second son Solomon with Bathsheba. And then he named his third son with Bathsheba Nathan. He names him the name of the prophet that came and rebuked him for sinning with Bathsheba. And I think that says something wonderful about David's character. So I think this says something wonderful about Jehoshaphat's character, that he would name his child after that. Mr. Kim comes up to me and he rebukes me, and he corrects me about something that I've done, and I go and name one of my sons Kim. That would be something special. And I think that's what we see this in these kings here, in these men. So continuing on, we see in verse 4 that Jehoshaphat, he dwells in Jerusalem, and he gets all the people together, and he returns them to the Lord God of their fathers. That he returns all the people back to God. Jehoshaphat appoints God-fearing judges in his area. He sets up judges that are going to respect the law, they're going to respect the people, and they're going to be in this unity of let's all bring all these people back to God together. And then Moab attacks in chapter 20. And when Moab attacks, there's another wonderful thing said about Jehoshaphat. In verse 3 of chapter 20. Verse 3 of chapter 20. Moab is attacking at the door, and Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord and proclaimed a fast throughout Judah. So Judah gathered together to ask help from the Lord. And from all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. And Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem and the house of the Lord before the new court, and then said, and he starts his prayer. So looking at this, when Moab attacks, they're at the door. We see that all those in Judah flee to Jerusalem. They flee to Jerusalem. They all get there. They're trying to get safe. They're there with their king Jehoshaphat. And what does he do? He sets himself to seek the Lord. That's what he always has done. He's afraid of the situation, so what is he going to do? Well, he's already prepared himself for what he's going to do. He sets himself to seek the Lord. And he gathers all the people in the city to come into the temple court, and then we see a king do something that we have never seen any political leader do in a long time. He leads the whole body in prayer. And he gives this prayer, and again, I told you at the beginning, that I'm worried about time. I'm not going to go into the prayer. I'm going to save that for another sermon. But this is one of the most wonderful prayers in the whole Bible. It really, truly is. And I encourage you to read it on your own if you have time this week, just to read this prayer, because the way he communicates to God is just beautiful. And basically he tells God, God, I know who you are. I know your might. I know your strength. And guess what, God? Your people are in danger. I know, God, that you want to come and you want to deliver us. And Lord, I believe that's what you're going to do. So immediately when he gets done with this prayer, Jehovah God, he comes through a Levite, and he has a Levite speak to Jehoshaphat and before all the people for himself. And God immediately replies with Jehoshaphat, because of what you've done here and what I've seen, this war doesn't include you anymore. This war is Moab versus me. And now this is my war. And he says, I want you to go out there and I want you to watch. So all the people, they go out there, the army goes out there and watches as God destroys Moab without any of the Israelites having to pick up a weapon. And so what happens is they go out there and Moab actually turns on itself, and the army that's against them starts killing each other, to the point where the writer here says there's not a living person left after it's all over. So what does the whole army of the Lord do as they watch this? They sing. They sing hymns. And as they're singing, God destroys their enemies. So you can see here just Jehoshaphat's character here. Even though he made some mistakes, he is someone who set himself to seek the Lord. He is someone that prepared his heart to seek God. Now, let's go back to 2 Kings 3. 2 Kings 3. And here we're going forward into time back to where we started. That was in the past. And here in 2 Kings 3, now Jehoram may have sons on the throne, and Jehoshaphat is still in power. And we see the Moabites rebel. They rebel against Israel. So verse 4 of 2 Kings 3. Now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he regularly paid the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. And it happened when Ahab died that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So King Jehoram went out to Samaria at the time and mustered all Israel. And he went and he sent to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? And he said, I will go up. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. Then he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, by the way of the wilderness of Edom. So just to break this apart, we see that Moab is rebelling, and what they have failed to do is send their tribute or their payment to Israel. That apparently they were sending them 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams wool. I tried to find a dollar amount on this, and I couldn't. I have no clue how to find the dollar amount of how much this wool and how much 100,000 lambs is, but I imagine that is a whole lot. That is a whole lot of this payment that Moab is sending Israel. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this because this isn't the main point I want to talk about, but it made me think, why is Moab sending this payment to Israel? Why is the king of Israel mad about it? And why is the king of Judah, Jehoshaphat, so willing to join the alliance? Because since he already got in trouble with joining the alliance with King Ahab, King Jehoram's father. So he's just trying to make me speculate about why this is the way it is, and maybe I don't have a perfect answer. Perhaps the reason why Moab was paying Israel 100,000 lambs is because the king of Israel and the king of Moab had made some kind of deal, and it was just a business transaction, and then Moab, he ended up not failing on his end of the deal. And maybe that's why this war starts out. It also could be that the king of Moab has been annually sending tribute to Israel. And the reason why I think he's annually sending to Israel, and I lean more towards this, is because of what David did several generations before. Several generations before. This is the only time we see Moab doing something like this again. But back in Samuel 8:2, it says, "Then he, David, defeated Moab. Forcing them down to the ground, he measured them off with a line. With 2 lines he measured of those to be put to death, and with 1 full line, those to be kept alive. So the Moabites became David's servants and brought tribute." This is the first time we see the Israelites just taking down Moab like this. It is a possibility that the reason why King Jehoram is mad, the reason why the king of Moab stopped the tribute, and the reason why that King Jehoshaphat was so willing to go to war for this is that David, Jehoshaphat's great-great-great-grandfather, punished Moab so bad that they're still sending tribute to them after all this time. And that perhaps maybe the king of Israel and the king of Judah, being that they've split the kingdom, are splitting this tribute or something like that. But it is a possibility that this is David's influence still trickling down to his great-great-great-grandson. And if this is true, which I lean towards that this is the reason, that says something about David. That people are still so afraid of David that he's living his great-great-great-grandchildren a legacy. A legacy that these other countries are still sending Israel tribute after all this time. But Moab's rebelling. That's all we need to know for this sermon. And now they've stopped, and we're going to go after them together. As well, Jehoram asked Jehoshaphat to go fight Moab with them, and Jehoshaphat agrees. As we're going to see something that Jehoram says later on, I think that God endorsed this war. Because Jehoram's going to ask, why has the Lord brought us out here? And by asking that question makes me think that maybe God communicated with them and told them that this was okay, because we don't see Jehoshaphat getting rebuked for this later on like he rebuked Ahab a while back. I hope that all of this slide that I've just said was not too confusing and made sense. But as long as you understand that they're going to the war, God's not upset about it, I don't think, and now they're going, that's all you need to know. So Moab is rebelling. So as we get out there, as we march on, we see that a problem happens. And that problem is that the people, the whole army, as they're marching out to meet Moab, they run out of water. They run out of water, which is a huge problem. Verse 9. So the king of Israel went with the king of Judah and the king of Edom, and they marched on the roundabout route 7 days. And there was no water for the army, nor for the animals that they followed them. And the king of Israel said, "Alas, for the Lord," this is where I'm getting this from, "for the Lord had called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab." But Jehoshaphat said, "Is there no prophet of the Lord here, that we may inquire of the Lord by him?" So one of the servants of the king of Israel answered and said, "Elisha, the son of Shaphat, is here, who poured water on the hands of Elijah." Then Jehoshaphat said, "The word of the Lord is with them." So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, "What have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother." But the king of Israel said to him, "No, the Lord has called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab." And Elisha said, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, surely were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not look at you nor see you. But now bring me a musician." Then it happened when the musician played that the hand of the Lord came upon him. So we see here, we see the big parallel between Jehoram and Jehoshaphat, and this is when they run out of water, which is a big problem. Probably a problem that none of us have really experienced before. But they have an army out there. They have animals to feed this army, and it's been 7 days, and they don't have anything to drink. That is a huge problem, especially when you have another army, the king of Moab's army, that's coming for you, and all you've got is dehydrated men that's supposed to protect you. This is a problem. We'll look at the way these two different men respond. Jehoram immediately complains, and not only complains, but accuses God himself for causing the problem. He accuses the Lord. He said, the Lord's the one that brought these three kings out here, the king of Edom as well, and he has delivered us into the hands of the Moabites. This is all God's fault. Well, Jehoshaphat responds with this, is that there a prophet that we can go to and we can inquire to the Lord? Is there not a prophet we can find so we can learn about what the Lord has in store for us here? This is not a complaining answer. He's not accusing anyone of anything. He's just saying, I would like to go to God. I would like to find out. Why does Jehoshaphat have this type of answer for this? Because Jehoshaphat has already a long time ago, before we ran out of water, has already prepared his heart to seek God. So his answer is, let's go to speak to Elisha, who has gone with them on this campaign. Again, that makes me believe that the Lord has endorsed this war. So Elisha is there, but when he goes to Elisha, Elisha sees Jehoram first, and Elisha gets angry at it. He says, Jehoram, why don't you go to your own prophets? Why don't you go to your father's prophets and your mother's prophets? Why are you coming to me? Now, as I've said before up here, especially talking about Elijah, is that Elijah and Elisha both had a lot of personality. And they had big personalities. So for someone to come up to him like this and he says, look, I know what you do. Why don't you go to your own prophets? Because you're never coming to me for anything, but now you want my help. And his response is, but the Lord is the one that put me in this mess. So again, he's willing to accuse God of this problem. And Elisha gets upset with him. So this makes me believe that he's probably never come to Elisha before. And maybe even perhaps Elisha had tries to go to Jehoram to go talk to him, but Jehoram may have sent him away. But now when Jehoram needs help, he's wanting to come to Elisha. So then we see what Elisha says. Elisha basically says that he would have ignored Jehoram, but since Jehoshaphat is there, Elisha is willing to communicate to him. He's willing to talk to him. So Jehoshaphat really saves the day here. And even though I believe that Elisha has this big personality and the way that he feels about this, I really truly believe this is the way God felt about it. God feels that, okay, now you want my help. You didn't want my help beforehand. You didn't prepare yourself for my help. You didn't want me then, but now you're in a bad situation and you want me now. You know what? Go to your own prophets. I think perhaps God himself feels this way towards Jehoram, and that's why Elisha says what he says. But since Jehoshaphat is there, he's willing to make an exception this time. So Jehoram, throughout this whole experience, has no clue what to expect. He's just following his feet. He's complaining. He's accusing God. And he just doesn't know what to do. He's just following his feet. But Jehoshaphat has already prepared himself to seek God. And that's why he has the response that he does. I'll wrap this up in just a second and go to the end of the story because I know we're eager to know. But let me go ahead and make some quick application now that we have this little graph up here. If you are a complainer, if you are one that are quick, that every time you have a bad situation happen to you, if you're quick to go, man, this is all God's fault. Why has God done this to me? Why does God put me in these bad situations? Why does God let these bad things happen to me? If that's you, you are a Jehoram. If you're the type of person instead that doesn't complain, that doesn't accuse God of being cruel to you, but you say, wow, this is a bad situation, you know what I need to do? I need to seek God. If you're the type of person that's already prepared yourself to do that, if you're that type of person, you're a Jehoshaphat. You're someone that looks to God for answers, not to look for God to become that victim status that we like so much. You are a Jehoshaphat. If you're someone that has no clue what to expect in life, you're just following your feet, you have no ambition of a spiritual nature, if you're just going to take every day as it comes and you're going to do with whatever you can of your own hands to make that day a little better, then you are a Jehoram. But if you're somebody that already, as of right now, has already purposed in your heart, has already prepared your heart that no matter what good or bad thing happens tomorrow, that you're going to seek God in that situation, if you're that type of person, then you're a Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat is the one who survives throughout this whole ordeal. Jehoshaphat is the one that's rewarded for this, not Jehoram. So we have to take some self-evaluation here just for a second and decide which one you're at. Because if you're in the other one, if you're in the Jehoram side, you're not going to want to be there long. Because what ends up happening is Jehoram dies, getting shot in the back while he's fleeing by Jehoshaphat's son. We don't see this in this story, but that's eventually what happens. Having this idea of I'm going to live my life, I don't have a clue what to expect, or have you already prepared in your heart that no matter what happens, you're going to seek God? Let's go ahead and kind of quickly finish up the story to kind of summarize here. Basically, God tells them through Elisha, I want you to dig these ditches. And when you dig these ditches, you're going to wake up and there's going to be water in these ditches. And then you can drink and your cattle can drink and everything's going to be fine. So right there, boom, God solves the problem. And Elisha actually says here in verse 18 that this whole ordeal, this is a simple matter to God. And I think, again, this is this Elisha's personality coming out. He's saying, look, this thing that you've asked of God for water, this is no big deal to him. He can do it. All you had to do was ask. Now, when Moab comes against them, when Moab comes, they see all these ditches, and I believe God's hand was in this. All the people, they look and they think all the ditches are filled with blood because of the red of the color or something like that. So what God causes Moab to do is to believe that Israel has turned against itself, and Israel is fighting Judah right now because of all this blood. So they decide to ambush them. When Moab comes and ambushes them, all the Israelites and those of Judah jump up, and those of Edom, I don't want to forget them, and they go and they killed all the Moabites. And the Moabites and the king of Moab flees into his city. And we see there at the very end of chapter 3, verse 26 through 27. I'm just going to read it. And when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too fierce for him, he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through the king of Edom, but they could not. And he took his eldest son, who he has reigned in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering upon the wall. And there was a great indignation against Israel, so they departed from him and returned to their own land. I didn't want to summarize that without reading it first. So basically, the king of Moab takes his oldest son, and he offers him an offering on the wall, and the Israelites decide it's just probably better to go home. And maybe there's a lesson in there that there are people that are just so crazy that they need to be left alone. And I think that's what Judah and Israel's doing here, is they're just deciding to go. However, regardless of the whole situation, God saves the day again in the book of Kings. Appreciate your close attention as always. And let me ask the question one more time. Are you a Jehoram or are you a Jehoshaphat? Are you a Jehoram or are you a Jehoshaphat? Jehoram right now, if he was in your situation, he would not care about his eternal soul. Again, he's just following his own feet. He's taking a day at a time. He's not worried about tomorrow. Whatever happens tomorrow, he doesn't care. Because this is the way Jehoram lives his life. If Jehoshaphat was in your situation, he will prepare himself to not only seek God, but he will prepare himself now to meet God. And I believe all those times that Jehoshaphat was going after God, looking for help, and all those times he was also preparing himself to meet God. That if some reason God decided not to deliver him from an earthly standpoint, but to deliver him in a spiritual standpoint, go ahead and take him on to paradise. Jehoshaphat would have been prepared to meet God. So the question is, are you prepared? Do you want to be prepared? Are you willing? Because we already know he's willing to do what he needs to do to make you prepared. If there's any way we can assist you tonight, please come forward as we stand and sing.